Hello everyone, here we are. I decided to do an inquiry into happiness because every now and again I get to thinking, oh, I'm just unhappy, which is a nice thing, nice work when you can get it and all that. And then every now and again I get to thinking, what is happiness? so this is the what is happiness side of things. And let's see, let's just play with it and explore it a bit. And happiness can be a lot of things. It can be involuntary, it can be sought after, it can hit you over the head. I'm going to give you a poem that I ran across last week and quoted last week, but the thing about poems is it's like music, you can always repeat a riff. The Great Master Chan of Daoming Monastery liked to compose poetry and to talk and laugh. Master Heng of Renshan instructed an attendant to keep him under control. It's kind of wonderful. The thing about this dude is he seems like he's too happy. And keep him under control. The great master said, human life is one dream. Enjoying lifetime is a good dream. Keeping life under wraps is a bad dream. I would rather have a good dream. Well, I think practices have a lot to do with happiness. Practices I was kind of, I don't know what I was, but discontented, I think, is the right word in my life. Always wanting it to be something different, And I tried political action of many kinds, and some of it was helpful, perhaps, but some of it wasn't, I think. But somehow changing the world wasn't the same thing as being at peace with the world. I mean, you can be at peace with the world and work to change the world, so I'm not opposed to that, but it's a thing, to changing the world will not make us at peace with ourselves. So how do we become happy? How do we become at peace with ourselves? And then we can do whatever we want. We can change the world. We can not change the world, whatever it is. So practices, I think, are part of it. I remember I first started meditating. I didn't know why. It was, in a way, not a choice, and so it's fate in that way. And people told me about meditation being offered, and I didn't know what it was, but I went along because I thought somehow I knew. My daimon wanted me to go, and then when I was in a temple, I started making flower arrangements. Somebody had to make flower arrangements, and the place was mainly full of guys whose ideas of beauty were primitive, and so I didn't have any idea of beauty either. But I liked poetry, and that was beautiful. And so I thought, oh, I'll just make the flower arrangements. And so I started making the flower arrangements, and they were kind of a bit pretentious actually at first, but maybe they still are. But then gradually I decided I would make, I don't know, it just became a practice, and I thought I'll just add some color and delight to people's lives. Maybe they're terrible at meditation, maybe I'm terrible, but we shall have flowers, So so this morning usually I make a couple of arrangements, one for let's spotlight Allison. That's one, which is sort of disciplined in a way, but it's full of Easter, And than the one I have behind me, which is undisciplined, but full of spring, So, and it's sort of fun in a way. And I'm wandering around cutting flowers without. The way to do flowers is like some other things, like martial arts probably. If you think about it, you get in the way. So you just go and collect flowers. Or I just go and collect flowers. And I'm thinking, I wonder what happiness is. I wonder what happiness is. And then I realize this is what happiness is. It's happening right now. And so happiness happens in the middle of in the middle of practice in some way, in the joy of life, like the Grand Master who said he just enjoying life is a good dream. And so there's some way, all the great teachers, let life come to you, let life saturate you, let life, let it enter your heart like that. So, and then I found, of course, I found it changed me. I found the practices changed me, but then there were other shifts where like something shifted in my mind, and I didn't organize the world the same way. In fact, I didn't organize the world nearly as much, but also mainly organizing the world was organizing it into problems that I had to solve. So I kind of stopped doing that. And so I was very loyal to my problems because I thought it was sort of reckless and irresponsible to ignore them. And I realized that, I don't know, I was hanging around with all sorts of different kinds of people in Australia, and then I came to the United States to, really study Zen and do koans and things like that, and something shifted in me, and so I don't know. I don't know how consistent it was, but I began to understand that joy was here. And it's always already here. And then I wrote a poem that I don't think is very good, but still comes back to me when I think about joy. And I went looking for various like great poems about joy, like the force that through the green fuse drives the flower, which is the first line of a Dylan Thomas poem. But actually, I'd forgotten really other parts of the poem. I don't think it's actually that great a poem, but it's a great first line. And it's about the whole of spring is there, And this is about a temple that was in Honolulu, and it was, the poem was for Anne Aiken, who was the kind of leader of the temple in certain ways, and the wife of the Roshi, and her money had funded the temple, actually. Today is not like another day. Today I want to know the speech of trees to sway and whisper, putting my twilights one after another, each with its own light. Today's cantata is the flowers of spring. 1,000 years of rain are in my hair, and still I can't explain. So that was a run at that's the happiness of meditation. It's just here, and everything that comes. That old saying about 10,000 things advance and meet you, that's called enlightenment. When you're chasing after them, that's not called enlightenment. That's called chasing after stuff, And so then one of the things I did was look up. I like the great dictionaries, like the Oxford English Dictionary, and I have I don't know, the 22 volumes or something of the old edition. They're this big, and sometimes I use them to stand statues on in Zoom. None right now. This is sitting on the flower ornament scripture right now, but they're great things to stack things up on, but they're thick, heavy books. And then now it's online, so I tend to consult it online. So anyway, I looked up happy, what does happy mean? And it's great. The word hap, as in happenstance, or it's an old word, but it's an old Middle English word. First uses are about 1200. That's a while ago, and apparently it came in from the Norse, according to the OED, and but the interesting thing about it is about related to fate and what happens without any control and beyond anything you can do. If you have the good hap to come into their houses, would be a sample thing. The good fortune, a chance occurrence, especially but it's also an event that's called unlucky. It may hap that you fall. May hap that you get fired. So I entertained the company with the many haps and disasters. There's somebody telling stories. And so, but it came to be attached to, it got extracted from happenstance and got attached to, in a way, something joyful where fate has blessed you in some way, a kind of benediction. And so, and I kind of like that. I like that your happiness is part of your fate. And you can resist your happiness, but as the Grand Master Dao Ming says, I prefer a good dream. And you can tell that there's nothing artificial about happiness. For me, it just fills my body. And I don't know where it hits you, but it's not a head thing. I just think I should be happy because it's not like that. That's a good way to notice you're maybe not happy. I heard a remarkable thing. I think I got this right, but somebody told me to listen to Nick Cave's people have been talking about him, the musician, him being interviewed. He lost his son, quite a while ago, and it's probably, I don't know, is there a worst thing that can happen to a human being? Losing a child's got to be right up there. And so this hap thing, and so he happened to lose a child. And the person, an intelligent but actually clueless person, was very carefully interviewing him, because Nick Cage always looks like somebody who might explode or go off like a firework. Although he's very bright and interesting. And anyway, this guy's delicately and formally interviewing him, and he says, it just must have been so terrible losing your son. And he goes, yes, it was just, well, it was such a relief. and the interviewer blinks, well, I just couldn't have any of, I lost myself, at that stage. I couldn't have a life that I'd constructed. I need to see the rest of the interview to understand where maybe I got this completely wrong, but I like the way I got it. And you can tell that sometimes when everything's stripped away, which is the hap of the world, has stripped everything away, the happenstance, then joy might be there. And, my favorite quote, the favorite not modern actually, but he's dead now, but Imre Kertész, the great Hungarian writer, he said, people interviewed him about how did he survive the war in a concentration camp and things, and he said, well, I think I've never been happier than in the camp, when I was exhausted and I didn't know if I'd live another day, and I got to sleep, and it was such a joy. And then everything was so beautiful. Then he joked, he said, yeah, so I just want one more day in this beautiful concentration camp. And so the joy that comes when you're not holding any reservations. And he couldn't then, because he didn't have any energy, didn't have much food, hardly any food, and exhausted and just fell asleep. And so there's that involuntary shiver you get sometimes when happiness just appears to you. And I think that's a profound thing. Uh, where you're not holding, mainly we define ourselves by our pain and our problem. And I've done psychoanalysis. I did psychoanalysis for many years and underwent psychoanalysis and so on. But and there are a lot of wonderful things about it. The connection with the unconscious. But a lot of a lot of the ways we try to explain ourselves as humans is by our problems. And if I didn't have my problem, who would I be? If I weren't right and you weren't wrong, who would I be? So certainty's got a lot to do with unhappiness. And happiness doesn't really care about that. Doesn't care about my problems. It doesn't care. I don't know. It's like, what do I want to do with this beautiful day? The sunlight striking through, birds chasing each other, and that funny fluttering of their tails they do when they're flirting with each other, things like that. So it's nice not to hold on to what's difficult. And I first learned this a long time ago when I had a really bright student who spent quite a long time in Japanese dojos, and he said, I don't know, if I get rid of my problems, how will I know who I am? And this is an innocent question. He was an attorney and his mind was somewhat complicated, but he, international attorney, and but very endearing. And there was it. How will I know who I am if I let go of if I step out of my problems? So just think of a problem you have. I mean, shouldn't be far to seek. It's like reaching behind you for the problem in the night, for the pillow in the night. So, and without it, what's life like without it? So, so it's kind of nice, to realize, I can step out of, I'm telling someone earnestly about my difficulty doing something or another, or this thing that happened to me, and I realize, I don't know, I don't care. It's kind of fun, It doesn't matter. And it's great that it doesn't matter. So, and there's a transparency that comes. I think practice is good, and then those kind of shifts you get in practice that are called things like seeing your true self, which means not a self, and things like that. And so then you don't have to deconstruct your unhappiness and saying, do I believe that thought or something like that, which can be helpful, but it's kind of hard work. And also it makes it, there's a you who's deconstructing you, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of somehow my shoelaces get tied together. But happiness, I think, is just a good plain thing in which we're not holding on to our difficulties, and especially holding on to who we are. And so, and then I put a thing here about, what about being happy when you're unhappy? And most of us have had that experience, I think, I wrote a piece about this, so somebody forgive me, but I remember long ago when I was working on a trawler in North Queensland, a fishing boat. And I think, I don't know what, we had a load of something, it might have been prawns, and we're just wallowing home, and the heavy weather's starting to come in, and you try to scurry for the port when that's happening, because mainly the weather up there is glorious, and when it's not, it just destroys everything. When it's in a bad temper, it's in a very bad mood indeed. So we were trying to get in before the bad mood set in completely with the ocean. We're rolling a lot, and I think we had stabilizers out or something. But anyway, we're rolling, and then we see a guy we know from the same harbour, know pretty well, and he's weighted down, and his bow is up, and his stern is low enough that the waves are coming in over his stern, and so he's wallowing around, and he's trying to do something. He's standing with his knees in the water while he's trying to get the boat. Boat must be on autopilot, it's going ahead, and it's a small, I don't know, it's a small 40-foot boat or something, little 40-foot trawler, but it's absolutely full of prawns, and he's not going to give one prawn back to the ocean. So, and he had set off. In fact, I happen to know this about him, that he'd let go the chains at midnight and drift on the current and set off before his creditors could impound his boat. So he was out there like needing to get a load of so he was a character, and all he had was his guitar and this boat that he owed everything on. So anyway, he's there, and so we radio across him just on the shortwave, so no one else will know here on the the very local band, not the shortwave, and ask him, do we need a hand? And there doesn't seem to be anything. He said, well, I could send my deckhand over. He could swim over to you, and I'm holding on the gallows, and the boat's rolling like this, and I'm holding on, and I know there are sharks down. I'm not that thrilled about swimming over, you know. On the other hand, I want to support him, you know. You don't want to let another fisherman lose his boat, you know. And so it's kind of a complicated thing. And I'm thinking, okay, I can do it. You know, I've been lucky with sharks so far, that sort of thing. So it's like superstition sets in, and we're talking, and I'm thinking, and it seems like this terrible like problem and crisis, and we want to get in too before the weather starts, you know, messing with us. We want to help our friend get in, and should I swim over? And he's a bit reluctant to have me swim over because he feels like I don't know, I might want some of his catch, something like that, for say that's salvage rights or something. So anyway, it's a complicated, like working class kind of trip going on here, and I'm thinking, I don't know, and I've seen sharks in there this morning in this very bay, and I'm thinking, I don't know, and sharks are attracted to boats full of fish, you know, and I'm thinking, I don't know, and should I go or should I not? And you know, this seems like this terrible dilemma we've got to decide. And then at some stage I realized, isn't this great? This is so wonderful. I'm, you know, the boat's rolling like a pig, you know, and it was a bit of a pig isn't quite the right metaphor, but it rolled, that boat, and it was very, you know, you could feel it would roll over, and then stop and roll back over. So it was all right, you know, and I didn't feel unsafe, but you know, it was sort of a little unnerving sometimes. And so we're rolling, and we're heavily laden and not that responsive to, you know, not that responsive to the helm. I mean, we're responsive, but you know, so it's harder to drive. And so, and then in the end, he decides, no, I think I'm getting ahead of it. I've got his cockpit was blocked or something, and he got it free so that water that came in could drain, and he started feeling like, no, it's all right, thank you for your help. And then later on, about midnight that night in the harbour, we saw him come limping in, you know, sell his prawns, save his boat. And so, but it was a great thing. Isn't this great? This terrible problem we have, he could lose his boat, I could swim over and get eaten by sharks. Isn't it great? So that's part of how you're happy in the midst of unhappy. You know, what you thought was misery, it's life, it's life, it's life. And so we life. And so I think and there's a great thing I remember when I started thinking, well, what's happiness? And this like memory came up from childhood where like a lot of like provincial towns, I grew up in Launceston, Tasmania, which wasn't even the interesting part of Tasmania to grow up in. And it was, but we had a lot of things like auto racing and mud. And at the fair every year, which we called the show, they always had the Wall of Death. And Richard and Leonard Thompson had this great song about ride on the wall of death. I'm gonna ride on the wall of death one more time. Ride on the wall of death. And the and I would go. My father would take me. I think he was interested. Another life for him. And they'd use these old motorcycles like Indians and Nortons and things that were stripped down, and you just ride around the bottom, and it's a cylinder, and there's a vertical wall that's just assembled for the fair, and then you're up, and then centrifugal force will keep you going, and you just go 90 degrees, you're riding around the wall, and this is incredibly thrilling to young kids. It was incredibly thrilling to me, and they can do stunts and things like that, but they try to go faster and faster and things. And I thought, oh, maybe this was only a local thing, but I looked it up on the internet, and Richard Leonard Thompson's song really was about that phenomenon, and there's all this stuff on the web about it, so it's kind of amusing. And then that was that thrill of how you're inside something that feels dangerous. And I was always terrified they'd fall, which I think is relatively safe. When I learned about motorcycles later and forces, it was relatively safe. But bad stuff can happen. Mainly that's like life. And anyway, so he seemed so great. And then I read this funny, so I listened to the song on YouTube, and there was a comment on YouTube. Somebody had heard Richard Leonard Thompson singing it at Oxford, or hadn't seen a concert, and this woman asked for a request, and she said, the song about the waterbed. And he said, what? I don't have a song. She said, yes, you do. Ride on the waterbed one more time. And so she turned it from danger to love. And that kind of thing, that's what life does, doesn't it? He was the thrill of, and there is that thrill of doing something edgy. And, I've known people who are, I was pretty close to this person who was a mixed martial arts fighter and weightlifter and things, and incredibly tough person, and just hitting and being hit, there's something amazing and wonderful. You're at peace inside that. And I remember that as a kid, getting hit in sports and things. And so even in the difficulty, the intensity of life itself is purifying, and the intensity of life itself, you can't ever escape from how mad life is, but you can find peace, your peace and your beauty in it, and you'll notice it's a sort of natural thing, really. It's a natural thing, and then you'll see that it's always in motion. The birds have gone, they're doing their thing here, and we've got like hundreds of birds in the garden. I remember in those old fairs they had this thing called a tilt-a-whirl, where you whirled around and kind of got sick, and kids got sick and things like that. And so what I noticed is, if we fill up the bird feeder, suddenly there's a bird-a-whirl going on, and the device of the universe starts working when you fix the bird feeder, and you realize, and there's a solar system whirl and a galaxy whirl going on, and the whole thing's like tilting around. We're trying to hang on, and it's intimate things happen. I was just outside, and this like beautiful emerald green hummingbird comes up and starts talking in my chest, and sometimes they talk to my face, but this one was, I think I had a bright red shirt on, like a plaid shirt, and I thought, what's going on? And then I looked, and the hummingbird feeder is empty. And so that's part of the bird whirl. So they'll come and remind me and have a conversation. Then sometimes they'll come to the window afterwards and thank you. So it's sort of fun. Alison Atwell told me she'd help me out if I got stuck on talking about happiness today. So that made me happy.
I was thinking about that restless unease and the kind of, I don't know, that endless grabbing after things of looking for happiness or trying to get, placing happiness in something that, some kind of situation or some person to feel a certain way, or my daughter to act a certain way, or marry a different person, whatever my mind has placed in where happiness is contained, and the endless struggle and pain around arranging the universe in that way. And it made me think of a story that I heard the poet Marie Howe, who I think is coming to John Joseph's Zen Luminaries program soon. She's a marvelous poet. And she was living in Manhattan at the time, and she'd adopted, late in life, she was 52, and she adopted a, a child, a little girl, and they were living in a rent controlled, like tiny little postage stamp apartment where she said it was so small that it wouldn't even qualify as a room in her former house that she'd grown up in. So one spring, when she was just making her way around Manhattan, she started to see these written on the sidewalk in bright blue, the word happiness in really large letters with an arrow pointing, and that's all, just this arrow pointing. And then she'd stumble upon another one, and it was just happiness with an arrow, but they'd be pointing into different places. So she just started to feel a kind of joy just seeing this word, and this she had no idea who was doing this or what it was about or anything. And then one day she was waiting for her daughter and her daughter's friends to get off the bus. And so she's on some crowded street in Manhattan, and she sees again the word in bright blue, happiness, and an arrow. But this time the arrow points directly to a giant, a very large circle in blue with the word here. And she said that all of these people were crowding in, trying to stand inside the circle and just laughing. And so when her daughter gets off the bus and her friends, they waited their turn, and they went and they stood inside the circle that said, happiness here. And she said, everyone just felt incredible amount of joy. All of a sudden, happiness here. So I was thinking about that, and also about the way happiness can appear even in your sorrows. And yesterday I had just, a terrible day. I woke up, everything had gone wrong, and kind of all of the accumulated tragedies and catastrophes of my life throughout the universe, throughout space and time, had sort of, I don't know, unhappiness here. And I had woken up inside of it. And at one point, I was just kind of, was talking to John about it, and I just started weeping and weeping, and tears just streaming down my face. And and in the midst of it, there was just suddenly a feeling of, I don't know, a kind of joy comes to mind, that it's a more is like the taste of life. There was a kind of I think some olives that John Joseph gave us from that he had made, and they're really briny and salty, and that kind of briny, salty deliciousness of one's deep sorrow, happiness here.
Thank you very much. Uh, Jeff Svoboda, do you have anything you want to say about happiness? Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm here. I saw the title of the talk, and it kind of reminded me of description of between happiness and joy, and what this said that joy has a mixture of it's a kind of a complex feeling with happiness and sadness and anger and and a certain complexity or mixture that they're all there together, and they can enjoy a certain thing or have some food in the house, but then realize it's made on a farm and there's tractors polluting and some people not being paid well. But in all that, there can be this kind of a joy in that moment.
Thank you very much. Tess Beasley.
This morning when I woke up, when I pulled back the curtain, the very first thing I saw was a whole tribe of turkeys coming up the driveway, and one had his fan completely out. And it was such a surprising sight because he was like with his fan driving the rest of the turkeys up the driveway and sort of keeping the other males out and keeping, his beautiful chicks sort of in sight. And so it was one of the things about happiness is surprise seems to be sort of like in Allison's story. Surprise seems to be a huge part of it for me. Because I never would have thought that's what I would have woken up to this morning. And all of a sudden I'm enchanted and sort of drawn in. But the thing I really liked you said at the beginning is that happiness and practice seems to go together, like any practice. And I was thinking about, for some reason, I was thinking about when I started realizing that, which was probably around sometime when I was in high school, when I'd started running. The running part, I mean, for the first mile or so, always, no matter what, you try to talk yourself out of it, right? Like the day is too hot or too cold or too something or whatever, but then you just sort of get in it and you forget all that eventually. But the other place that I really started noticing it was my job in high school. I was the kennel attendant at a boarding kennel at a vet office. And no matter what, I mean, sometimes it would be, 40 dogs that would have to get let out and the snow would be thick or it'd be pouring rain, or you might have all the conditions were all over the place. You might walk in that morning to a dog that had gotten loose and eaten a whole bag of dog food and all, whatever mess might be all over the place. You might walk into, you might have a beagle in the lot who wouldn't stop, yelping. You might have, no matter what you did to try to figure out, like, well, which dogs could hold it and which couldn't by the time you made your round, all these sorts of things would be happening all the time. It'd be hot, it'd be cold, it'd be smelly, it'd be loud, but by the end of every single shift, I just loved it. Like, no matter, and I think part of that is because, I mean, part of it, there's the connection that appears with each of these creatures, even the ones that try to bite, or even the ones that have whatever might be going on, that I really did love. But I think part of the practice thing is when you're really willing to stay in something, you just forget. You forget all the problems. You forget your opinions. You forget whether it's good or bad that it's loud, or whether it's good or bad that it's, what the weather might be, or any of those kinds of things. And like that what Allison was just saying, you just realize, oh, I'm here. Whatever here is, I'm just here, and it's nice, whatever it is. So I don't know. It's a fun topic. Thank you.
It's the Charlie Brown thing about teachers asking Charlie Brown about happiness, and Charlie Brown saying, "Yes, man, a dog and a banjo. Yes, ma'am, a dog and a banjo. 9 children, 9 dogs, and 9 banjos. We're talking about happiness here." So it's actually, you had your more than 9 dogs. Okay. John Bennett, do you have anything you'd like to say?
So I've been I've heard you speak in the past about enjoying our meditations and um, rolling around in them. And I've really been remembering that recently, trying to remember it and then trying not to try to remember it. But one way or the other, it has been occurring to me in meditations. And I find that I really love it. And at the end of any meditation, when I'm able to just be there and enjoy myself, let all the rest fall away, I am really happy when it during it and at the end of it. And then recently I've noticed that if I can sort of do the same thing. I'm sort of tiptoeing into this, but I can do the same thing in my busy life. I can moments throughout the day just relax, let the dream become more dreamlike, and um, just relax into enjoying whatever the heck it is I'm doing, even if it's something I didn't think I wanted to be doing. And it has kind of the same effect. It's quite nice, and it's definitely connected to happiness. And so anyway, that's just sort of my current amazement and delight at moments in the day.
Thank you, John. Part of happiness for me is that there's not really a good time to end meditation. Someone who comes here often said, sent me a note, actually it was my daughter, she said, the happiest times for her are when we're sitting in meditation on the back deck and the tilt-a-bird thing is going on, and there's just nothing needs to be done. We're just meditating. You know. So the eternal. So each moment sees eternity. You know, I want to do something that I don't usually do, and he can say no, but I want to, Michael Wilding, I just was so touched by your music. I don't know if you want to say anything. It doesn't have to be about music. And no is also a reasonable answer.
I'll give it a shot. Well, yeah, music always makes me happy. It's kind of like this catalyst. But aside from that, I was thinking that the other day, and I don't make this mistake very often these days, but I girded my loins and went onto The Guardian, and, you know, read enough to kind of wrap me in dark thoughts. And I was walking across my garden on my way to go to work. And there I was feeling really confined in all of these kind of this stuff that I just found out about what was going on in that day. And my dog charged across my path carrying 3 frisbees in his mouth at the same time. And 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 all of a sudden it was so funny to me, and it was so alive and vivid and full of juice that it occurred to me that everything else was just, it's kind of like in this morning sunshine, nothing else exists, and everything else became completely irrelevant, and not irrelevant, but it didn't exist. It was the moment of that happiness for me was so juicy that it seemed like the only real thing there was. And it was just, and I was filled with it. It was just really, just this wonderful thing. And I don't know. Okay, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Michael. We don't have much time left, but I would like to hear Todd say something if he's up for it.
Hi there. I've been having this good dream the last couple of this last week. Actually, I can't really say that much about the dream because I don't really remember the dream, but I remember waking up and the feeling of coming back or coming into the form of a human and sort of taking that physical shape and that mental shape of a human life. And what was so interesting about it is that it seemed completely arbitrary. Like I could have taken the shape of something else, like a fox or a dog, or some space robot. I've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately, so it just seemed like, oh, a human. Oh, so surprising. And so also I could just clearly see that there just wasn't going to be any way to manage a human life. Like it just was beyond anything that I could really comprehend. Um, and it just felt like just a giant relief, this surprising, like, oh, I can just be alive. And that's it. It was a good dream. Thank you.
Maybe you want to tell people that you had a fever and you were sick for a week.
Yes, I did have a fever last week.
That's why you were in a non-human form.
Yes, yes. I find fevers to be quite beneficial. It was in this case. So yeah,
Thanks, Todd.
thank you.
And thank you very much, everyone. It's nice to be together. Yeah, nice to be a thing.